Greetings, all slayers and slashers. Don't make yourself cozy. Pack your bags, it's off to the woods we mosey. For tonight I provide a spectacle unexpected, a game of puzzles where time flows quite hectic. We must abandon the castle, we're living remote. Come close, stay warm, start a fire, grab a coat. This place is a quaint one, but don't call it shoddy. This is the setting of tonight's tale, Homebody. The human mind is a wondrous thing, capable of both immaculate creation as well as horrific destruction. Its greatest impediment, itself. Emily, a young girl, pulls over on the side of a disgustingly dark and desolate road. She reaches for her phone. The display shows she has 26 unread messages and missed calls. The only call she allows into her life is from Laura. A determined voice of reason, Laura provides harsh encouragement. Finish the drive. Your friends are waiting for you, Emily. When Emily arrives at a lonely house in the middle of nowhere, she is met by her friends, but greetings are hardly given. This is a group of friends, but the tension between them fills the already damp and decrepit home. Cutting the atmosphere in this building with a knife would perhaps be too easy. You could just as easily use one half of a pair of scissors. The door behind Emily shuts. I assure you, we will not be leaving through it anytime soon. Homebody traps us in a house, small, cramped, densely packed with a nightmare so terrifying some may wish to turn back now. Because we aren't stuck in here with a beast or closing walls, we're stuck in this home with a far more body-shuddering concept. Conceptually, the mind can create horrors unimaginable. We like to linger on these horrors and think of the what-ifs and could-happens. However, far worse than these are the horrors that are so very real. The concepts mankind can form in their mind with terrifying realism because we know them all too well. Homebody's true horror lies here, in the concept of spending an unknown amount of time in a small home full of friends that you're beginning to think don't even like you. I'm the hairiest Hare, and on this episode of Hare's Haunting Hour, I invite you to roam these halls with me for but a moment as we explore the dark recesses offered to us within Homebody. Our protagonist, Emily, anxiety-ridden yet still incredibly driven, is an artist and overall good person. No doubt in your lifetime you have encountered many Emilys, or perhaps you are one yourself. She's the type of person to speak easy, to let you get all of your words in, even when she has plenty to say herself. She's not a pushover, she's just modest, humble, a little on the soft-boiled side. Fluidly, she could fit into any friend group. However, at a party, Emily and anyone like her would possibly seem invisible. Blending into the background of a party happens to be my speciality, so I'm just here to call a spade a spade. And look what we have here, a bit of a weekend party. A group throwing a friendly reunion for young adults growing up too fast. And since we're here, invisible in this small den in the woods, let's take a brief look around at its denizens. Cliff is our initial contact when we finally arrive at the house, many hours late. Cliff does not greet us, he doesn't even speak. He flicks his cigarette and walks inside. What could have transpired between him and Emily to lead to this? Dialogue will later reveal that the gang has spent a considerable amount of time apart. Has absence caused Cliff to grow bitter? Maybe he resents Emily for something she did. Maybe he just hates us. Gary is our friendly glue to the crew. He greets us, happily invites us in. When Emily speaks to anyone in this game, she always has a strong air of awkwardness lingering around every sentence. It's enough to make every conversation feel incredibly detached or uncomfortably relatable. However, conversation with Gary is easy, overall carrying an air of casualness. I've met many Garys in my time, and that experience tells me that Gary, like the many I've known, are essential fits into any group. Without this positive attachment to each individual in the group, the dynamic might fall apart. Then again, maybe it could carry on without him, completely unhindered. Megan is a chilled-out gamer girl. Her main focus for the duration of this game is on the beloved activity of sitting too close to the television playing classic bootleg games. While she will not offer much throughout this experience, at least she's kind and genuine. But are her words of sincerity sincere? Interrupting her seems a little rude. Maybe she'd be better off if we just left her to her games. Francine has a foreboding aura around her. While she asks us questions about how life is going, pressing to hear about our successes and our friends, there's a lingering awkwardness behind it. Is that Francine's doing, or is it perhaps Emily's? Either way, in the story, Francine operates often as the mother of the gang. We all have one. In gameplay, she's the one I always struggle with consistently finding throughout the house, but maybe that's just me. The only one left has yet to arrive, but he'll be here soon. Our missing piece to the puzzle is Pete. Pete is an unusually quiet guy, mainly because I'm still not sure if he's even. The house we will be staying in for the preceding night is one that is emblematic of the case against large open worlds and in favor of these densely packed small areas. The house, in design and implementation, is clearly reminiscent of classic buildings in video games such as the Spencer Mansion in Resident Evil. The comparison is even more apt when the front door locks behind us. Keeping it barred shut is a mechanical lock. The lock leads to a power conduit. The conduit has cables that lead elsewhere, including one into the floor. The power conduit requires power itself, which must come from the cable leading to the cellar. The cellar itself is locked behind a simple keypad. What is the combination? Where do we find it? The upstairs area has a computer permanently powered by a self-contained power source. The computer contains a permanently displayed program allowing for anyone curious to play a game of Minesweeper. Does this game have more meaning? What about the picture in the corner of this bedroom with a peephole through the eyes of the painting? Or how about the locked attic access? What's with this strange button system next to the door? In the world of video games, exploration and experimentation are vital. Classic adventure games predating the point-and-click era commonly failed players in this field. The solutions to puzzles were rigid, and often the most mundane and unpredictable of actions led to the harsh penalty of death and restarting. Later games of this genre began to master the concept of allowing more freedom in player approach. While some puzzles remained extremely obtuse and rigid, the solutions were discovered through exploration, and the exploration was encouraged by not punishing the player for trying anything and everything available to them. Here in the home of one Parker Nest, rented out for a few days, we find copious amounts of puzzles connected to puzzles. These confusing contraptions are enough to make even puzzle gaming veteran heads spin. Keeping track of codes and solutions to puzzles will be of high importance. Had this game been released many years prior, it would have been up to the player to bust out the old pen and paper to take notes. Thankfully, Homebody does us the incredible favor of providing a memory log. Within this log rest snapshot images of clues or previously completed puzzles. Nearly any time the game has information worth revisiting, it is kept here. Nest's home is littered with notes, left lying around. Each note serves us by hinting at puzzles, their purpose in the world, and more often than not, the state of worrying mental decay from the man who had them implemented. Not satisfied with the copious amounts of ominous locks and dreadfully unsettling paintings and pictures, the home shatters the average video game expectation by containing entire scans of entire books like Frankenstein and Dracula. This structure you find yourself trapped in has enough in every inch of its careful construction to both make you feel a familiar sense of comfort, while simultaneously keeping an invisible, hovering hand of danger just beyond your line of sight. Within only a few minutes, you will likely have the layout of this small home committed to memory. It's simple, quaint, easy to relate to. Its halls stretch, but not too far. Its rooms are interconnected, plenty of doors. You'd likely fare just fine if someone were to turn out the lights or tragedy strikes. In our case, both come in the form of a lightning strike. At 9:15 p.m., a powerful bolt of lightning with no prior warning takes out the power, throwing our protagonists and friends into a darkened state of subtle concern. Television and console are off. Lights no longer function. The only survivor seems to be the computer equipped with its own power source in the main bedroom. However, something odd may catch the average player's attention when the lights go out. The previously locked door to the cellar now rests wide open, an eerie red glow emanating from its descending staircase. As video game players are wont to do, even in our most frightful moments, we cannot resist the call of curiosity. Even ignoring our cat-like nature, when put under the lens of a video game, we can recognize both a change in the familiar world state as well as the accompanying light bellowing from below as our two clear signs of progression. Entering the cellar, however, does not suddenly provide answers to the burning question. questions. Instead, it presents even more oddities. A locker with a play button on it, another liquid puzzle like the one upstairs, a locked cage, an out-of-place door with another code input, and finally, the power conduit we needed to find in order to even attempt to unlock the front door. However, even that is not as simple as it seems. Another series of buttons? Again, there is enough in this home to make heads spin until the neck snaps, though I wouldn't suggest standing around and staring at these puzzles for too long. When the clock, omnipresent in the top right corner, hits around 10:45 p.m., Homebody twists its blade one more time. A masked, unknowable creature is unleashed upon the small home. Its cramped rooms and tight halls no longer feed you a sense of comfortable coziness. Now these twistingly simple areas, one leading into another, are an ever-constant maze set to either entrap you or assist you. Just as easily as you can put walls in between yourself and the slow-moving killer, the fixed camera angles and subdued sound design can give this murderous monster the element of surprise. Our killer is both unknowably foreign in design while still maintaining aspects that are familiar. Assuming you can get a good look at it, you'll notice their robe, a boring bathrobe or an aristocratic attire for leisure. The mind is left to wonder thanks to the classic PlayStation-esque graphics, dithering and warbling, keeping visuals just identifiable enough to be familiar, but just strange enough to provide the proper amount of fear. Nowhere is this better displayed than the horridly simple mask the killer possesses. Bird-like in shape, person-like in its emotionless smile, this sadistic slasher of the night equips itself with a simple scissor torn apart, its matching partner no longer present. No longer needed either. Our carnivorous captor carelessly creates corpses of our characters. Any room entered by the murderer is a room guaranteed to be a final resting place. You have no means of fighting back as a player, and neither do your friends. Helplessly, you can only watch as the killer tears its blade through each of them until it is just you and this monster alone in some cramped den, doors locked, lights killed, knives out, beaks bloody, stranded far out in the middle of nowhere. While maneuvering around the house just outside of the unidentified killer is certainly possible, time does not wait. If you hope to escape, you must solve these previously presented puzzles. However, take just a moment too long. Make one simple mistake, make too much noise, and Emily's dead. Though death is only the beginning. The human mind is a monstrous thing, capable of tragedies terrible and subtly seditious. Its greatest strength, itself. The door behind Emily shuts. I assure you, we will not be leaving through it anytime soon. Homebody traps us in a house, small, cramped, densely packed with a nightmare so terrifying some may wish to turn back now. Because we are, in fact, stuck in here with a beast of humanoid proportions. Worse than that, however, Emily finds herself stuck in this disturbingly strange home indefinitely. Time, permanently signaled in the top right corner, proves we are where we started. This night has begun again, starting from the moment the door shuts. Despite the restart, Emily remembers it all. The puzzles, the lock, the conversations, and most vitally, the killer. Perhaps now she can change it. She can make a difference and end this madness before it has a chance to take hold. Start simple. The human side of us will no doubt naturally spring forth and attempt to perform what everyone in a time loop would try at least once. And when that confusingly doesn't work, the truth begins to settle in. We are alone. This fight is ours, and ours alone. In this infinite spiral of madness, we can only depend on ourselves, and clearly not even that is true. If we cannot trust our words, we must guide with action. The time loop is a tried and true formula that has popped up in the world of entertainment a shockingly exhaustive amount of times. That being said, the true strength of a trope lies not in its existence, but instead how it is used. Homebody uses the time loop to initially add to its horror, then slowly transfers the power dynamic to favor the player. It only takes a couple of scissor slices to start to settle into the sediment of this seditious estate, but after coming to terms with a threat, you can now begin your ascent towards conquering that threat. Over the course of several loops, Homebody will continue its track record of encouraging the player to explore, experiment, and now it encourages you to endure. Because by the time you've been stabbed at least once, certain elements will become clear. Some puzzles need to be solved before a certain time, some after. Some puzzles cannot be solved before you've completed a different one. Other puzzles give you information that doesn't seem relevant, only to find it comes in handy much later. Yet, the most annoying puzzles usually contain a way to quickly conquer it, a quicker tactic or a secret code. In this way, every loop can feel like an incremental increase in power. Before you realize it, you'll already be a master of this miniature mansion and its myriad of mosaic mysteries. Yet, just as your confidence grows, the dagger sinks just a little deeper. Homebody has one final rule to its time shenanigans, and that is, the rules can be broken. And just as you're getting comfortable, a new scare emerges. The important factor of a time loop tale is the all-too omnipresent fact where the main character remains special. They have information that others do not because they are the only ones in a time loop. The fact that you retain information that helps you conquer the unchanging environment is Homebody's initial hook, where our looping protagonist feels helpless under the shifting sands of time, tossing her back to the beginning of this dreadful night. The knowledge she gains and uses to her advantage begins to give her power and control over that unknowable force. Giving players power over what they should fear in a horror game is a slippery slope. Give too much in either direction and you begin to lose the player's interest. Either they are too capable or they are too passive. Both present a problem. Homebody, effortlessly, without the game ever needing to call attention to it, slyly steals that power out from under you in a way that immediately raises the tension the moment you realize it's happening.
Why is it already open?
The confidence a player receives from looping is purely based on the static status of the house. It remains the same. The characters mostly stick to their same zones. Puzzles always have the same solution. But then, suddenly,
it's broken now.
The computer displaying Minesweeper has its screen busted out. After punching in the cellar door code enough times, it's just permanently, automatically open. These by themselves could easily be seen as a way to just help quicken the experience, to get the player to the next moment faster, and yes, that's exactly what it is, but it goes beyond that. There's something that skitters through the dark hallway. It only happened once for me. I looked out this window only a few times, and only once there was someone else out there. There are so many small hints and moments like this that really do well to add spice to a dish that would otherwise start to pale in flavor. But then, deep into the game, as you near the end of the rabbit hole,
Are you already?
the killer, mangled, more disturbing, and much faster, is loose at a time far too early. In fact, it may be possible that it's been releasing sooner and sooner with each loop. With a game this predictably unpredictable, it's easy to assume anything is possible. Even easier to plant that fear in the mind and let it fester. Regardless, with this final dagger twist, just as you're nearing the end, the final goal becomes immensely clear. The ramp up in stakes and difficulty culminates in one final puzzle where you're taking everything you've learned and tossing it into one final sprint, avoiding the killer, speedrunning puzzles that were once difficult, and praying you don't accidentally waste a few of those precious seconds afforded to you. The stress and anxiety during this final bout filled me with both dread and determination. Each final area is filled with constant loops and tunnels made perfect for an unfortunate soul who took too long, now attempting to escape the killer's ceaseless hunt. The fear of not just the known threat, but the possible future unknown settles in. I've managed to go this long without discussing it, but that's because I wanted to prove to you that Homebody is so intimately crafted with its gameplay that it wouldn't have been all that upsetting if the game had shipped with almost no story at all. A short little horror romp through a spooky house is all this game needed. However, it goes beyond that. And despite its occasionally cringe-inducing dialogue and often long-winded delivery, Homebody manages to have the story elements of a great horror tale, and better yet, manages to contain an uplifting message that touches on anxiety, depression, and the self-loathing we love so much here on this channel. If you have been convinced to give Homebody a shot, I encourage you to do so now. I won't go any further with this discussion on the plot. I genuinely respect the story that much. I think it's a good enough experience that I can easily say that if you relate to any of the themes I mentioned and love to hear and see a perspective of those emotions provided to you in an art medium of this nature, you don't want to skip out on what this game offers. I wouldn't call it profound or even all that moving. However, what I would say is that I find it humbly relatable. It feels personal, and that's refreshing to see in any industry, but especially in the realm of gaming. Anxiety is like a time machine. It doesn't just affect you now in the moment that it reveals its shadowy form. Anxiety has an anaconda grip on every moment in your life, past, present, future. Reflecting on the past becomes a muddled memory of distant mistakes. The vignetted mental camera focuses on all the things you did wrong and reveals truths that are completely fabricated by the fiction of your mind. All the pieces line up, you think. All the evidence begins to make sense and come into a clearer picture. My friends hate me. Perhaps they never liked me at all. The present, similarly, is flooded with a sea of fear. Make one wrong move and they'll finally be fed up with you. Fed up enough to yell at you or call you out on your crap. Say something or do something that may forever change the trajectory of your friendship and your life. As your mental TARDIS begins to stretch webs of anxiety well into the nebulous future you cannot predict nor control, you realize that the present version of you has only one decision you can make for everything to be alright. For us all to exist happily, the best option for you is to do nothing at all. Say nothing. Be nothing. Let the world pass you by, lest you make another slip and ruin everything for everyone. In time loop stories, it is sometimes far too simple to accidentally write yourself into a unique corner. When a time loop scenario is finally broken, the audience needs to leave fulfilled. In some, they walk away with a fulfilling sense of character growth. In others, it can be a melancholic acceptance of fate. In Deathloop, the game ends with a feeling that reads more like, oh, okay, that's it then? Homebody doesn't suffer from this same fate. In its final moments, the game sticks the landing by not only having more to say and do after your perfect run, but also manages to pull off some more twists and turns along the way. All of these in gameplay can amount to making the player feel a sense of finality and progression. Story-wise, it puts a closing arc on the narrative that feels equally confusing, satisfying, and fulfilling. Poetically reflective of the most celebrated horror titles in both games and movies, making it, in my mind, worthy of discussion alongside some of these greater, higher budgeted tales. Perhaps ironic, considering I've left out most of this game's juiciest bits. Homebody is a time loop tale about anxiety and the process of getting over that anxiety. The very title itself could be broken down and analyzed through a lens based on how deep into the game you choose to go. Homebody as a title implies someone who is more of an antisocial shut-in, not out of circumstance but out of choice. Reflective of our main character, Emily, introduced with her anxiety getting the best of her, wishing she could turn around and just head home. She is a homebody, and the further you play, the more this becomes clear. Meanwhile, homebody also applies to the owner of the house. Parker Nest was clearly also a shut-in, but of the mad scientist variety. Put the word homebody in ominous red, white, and black graphics, and then put that next to the Steam tag horror game, and the innocent word now takes on a foreboding declaration of our character's fates. In the closing moments of the game, Homebody reveals its title to have one more purpose, but you'll have to play it yourself to get that information. From its title to its credits, Homebody kept me engaged, fulfilled, scratching my head, and altogether overjoyed. Naturally, if I'm going to talk about it here in this hallowed ground, you better believe it gave me a chill or two. More than that, however, it spoke to me. Sometimes when I play a game, watch a film, read a comic, I walk away with a feeling like I've learned something that day. I walk away with a message. Art is the delivery of that message. How you choose to word it is done through the medium, the genre, and the countless nuances in between. More often, however, I find that sometimes I walk away with a message that I'm unclear if the creators intended. Chibi Robo wanted to tell me about spreading happiness, but opened a window to a side of unhappiness I hadn't known in my life until then. Cyberpunk 2077 asked me to consider what makes life important, and attempted to answer that question. Yet, walking away from the game, I feel like I discovered an echo of myself. Life isn't important, and that's what makes it so unique. Disco Elysium is a tale of a beaten, disheveled man who needs to get his life together and solve one last crime. I walked away with the realization that maybe the past, both its burdens and its triumphs, aren't worth holding on to so tightly. Whether these messages were at the core of the experience is dependent on the observer. Trying to interpret one artist's message is certainly an easier task than interpreting the many nuances that appear in a video game, which is, alternatively, art made by a long list of individuals with varied backgrounds and perspectives of reality. Perhaps that's what made Homebody such a pleasant experience, even in its most dreadful of times. It truly feels like a message is delivered, envelope sealed, words clear on the page. It feels so real, so personal, in a way that few games manage. Homebody discovered a way to discreetly deluge to me the point that I think it's so desperately intended to deliver. And even if this message is of my own mental cognition, it is still nonetheless valuable. Anxiety is a time machine, and just like any use of such a device in pop culture, its overpowered nature can begin to ruin the timeline of events in your life, but only if you let it. Anxiety can never and will never be so simple as a beast you need to slay, but you can begin that process of healing by letting it go, releasing its control on you. Over and over, events can play in your mind, all that you did wrong, all the little things you should have done back then popping up as if they were such obvious bright red buttons that should have been pressed. You can play these in your mind over and over until you come up with the night's perfect run. Hey, if you want to, you can even apply this to the future. Any social event upcoming, play it out in your mind over and over until you're sure you've solved it. The grand puzzle that we call life. But it's never that simple. We all wish it was, but you're not alone in that feeling. You're not alone in that fight. You are not alone. And it's never too late. You can start being the you want to be today. You just gotta take that first step. Stop focusing on the what ifs and the could happens. Focus on the todays and the right nows. With a little determination and a healthy dose of knowledge, you can conquer even the greatest foes, be they of a scary fictional variety, or perhaps something a little closer to reality. Once you step out of that place that right now feels like an endlessly looping death trap, I promise all you've been through will have been worth it. Catch you in the shadows. Be excellent to each other.